June 25, 1950. In a quiet Korean village near the 38th parallel, a farmer begins his day, unaware that everything is about to change. Suddenly, distant artillery shatters the calm. North Korean soldiers, backed by Soviet tanks, surge across the border. Panic erupts. Families flee, not knowing where to go. The invasion is swift and brutal, tearing apart homes and lives. The Korean War has begun, splitting lives into before and after. The peninsula would never be the same. The pain of division lingers, even now. To understand the war, we must look back to Korea's years under Japanese rule, from 1910 to 1945. Koreans suffered oppression, their culture and language suppressed. When Japan surrendered in 1945, hope for independence soared. But freedom was complicated by the arrival of two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The US and Soviets, once allies, now eyed Korea as a strategic prize. In a rushed decision, two American officers drew a line at the 38th parallel, dividing the country. The Soviets took the north, the Americans the south, without consulting Koreans. What was meant as a temporary boundary soon became a hard border. The line split villages, families, and a people with a shared history. The dream of unity faded as the Cold War deepened. The division set the stage for civil war. A simple line on a map became a permanent scar. Korea's fate was decided by outsiders, not its own people. The seeds of tragedy were sown. The division hardened quickly. In the north, the Soviets backed Kim Il-sung, who built a communist state with total control. In the south, the US supported Syngman Rhee, whose government was anti-communist but often repressive. Both leaders claimed to represent all of Korea. The Cold War turned Korea into a battleground for global ideologies. Skirmishes erupted along the border, tensions rising. Each side prepared for war, convinced unification could only come through force. Kim Il-sung sought Stalin's approval to invade the south. At first, Stalin hesitated, fearing US involvement. But after the Soviets developed the atomic bomb and China turned communist, Stalin gave the green light. The US seemed to signal Korea was not a vital interest. The stage was set for a devastating conflict. Korea became the first major proxy war of the Cold War. The world watched as the peninsula edged toward disaster. The hopes for peaceful reunification vanished. The border became a flashpoint for global rivalry. War was now inevitable. The countdown had begun. On June 25, 1950, North Korea launched a massive surprise attack. The South Korean army was outnumbered and outgunned. Seoul fell within days. The world was stunned. America saw it as communist aggression. President Truman brought the crisis to the United Nations, which called for military support. US troops, rushed from Japan, were unprepared for the ferocity of the North Korean advance. Early American units suffered heavy losses and retreated. By August, UN and South Korean forces were cornered in the Pusan Perimeter, making a desperate last stand. General Walker's order was clear. There will be no more retreating. For 6 brutal weeks, they held the line, buying time for reinforcements. The fate of South Korea hung in the balance. The world waited to see if the defenders would hold. With UN forces trapped, General MacArthur proposed a daring plan, an amphibious landing at Inchon, far behind enemy lines. The risks were enormous: treacherous tides, narrow channels, and heavy fortifications. Many doubted the plan, but MacArthur insisted its boldness would catch the enemy off guard. On September 15, 1950, US Marines stormed Inchon after a fierce bombardment. The North Koreans were stunned. Their supply lines were cut. Simultaneously, UN forces broke out from the Pusan Perimeter. The North Korean army collapsed, fleeing north in chaos. Seoul was recaptured within weeks after intense fighting. The war's momentum shifted overnight. UN forces crossed the 38th parallel, aiming to unify Korea. Victory seemed within reach, but as they advanced, a new threat loomed across the Yalu River. The war was about to take a dramatic turn. As UN troops neared the Yalu River, China warned them to stay away. General MacArthur dismissed the threat, believing China wouldn't intervene. He promised his soldiers they'd be home by Christmas. In late October, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops secretly crossed into North Korea. In November, they launched a massive surprise attack, overwhelming UN forces. The weather turned deadly cold, compounding the chaos. The advance became a desperate retreat. At the Chosin Reservoir, U.S. Marines fought their way out against impossible odds, enduring brutal cold and relentless attacks. The dream of a quick victory vanished. The Chinese intervention changed everything. Seoul fell again in early 1951. The war became a bloody stalemate, with both sides locked in fierce combat. The conflict was now a direct, if undeclared, war between the U.S. and China. The hope for peace faded as the fighting dragged on. After the shock of China's entry, UN forces regrouped under General Ridgway. By March 1951, Seoul was recaptured for the fourth time, but the city was in ruins. The front stabilized near the 38th parallel. Neither side could win outright. The war devolved into a brutal stalemate. Battles raged over hills with names like Pork Chop and Heartbreak Ridge. Soldiers endured freezing winters, muddy trenches, and constant danger. Progress was measured in yards, not miles. Diplomats began peace talks in July 1951, but negotiations stalled over prisoners of war. The fighting continued for 2 more years, costing thousands of lives. The war became a test of endurance and willpower. The grand strategies were gone. It was now a war of attrition. The world grew weary, but the suffering on the front lines never stopped. The stalemate dragged on, with no end in sight. On July 27, 1953, an armistice was signed. The fighting stopped, but peace never came. The border remained near the 38th parallel, now marked by the heavily fortified Demilitarized Zone. Nearly 3 million Koreans were killed, wounded, or missing. Millions more became refugees. Families were torn apart, many never reunited. The trauma of war left deep scars on the Korean people. In the U.S., the Korean War became the Forgotten War, overshadowed by World War II and Vietnam. Yet its impact was profound. America's commitment to containing communism deepened, and a permanent military presence remained in South Korea. South Korea rebuilt into a vibrant democracy. North Korea became isolated and repressive. The DMZ stands as a stark reminder of division. The war's lessons are clear lines on a map can divide generations, and unresolved conflicts cast long shadows. Remembering the Korean War is essential to understanding today's world. Its legacy endures on both sides of the DMZ. The pain of division and the hope for peace remain.